I want to read to start with. My wife brought to my attention only a couple of days ago an article from her alumni magazine from Carleton University by a fellow named David McDonald. And the headlines were provocative. The headlines start, "Smarter and smarter machines plotting to replace us if they haven't already done so. Jobs that didn't exist 5 years ago, jobs that won't exist 5 years from now. Redeployment, reskilling, contracting out, outsourcing, downsizing, workers without too much work, workers with too much work, workers without any work, workers without any work without any workers." And he suggested that if we contemplate our current world of work, we will feel the twin juggernauts of technology and globalization transforming everything we do. We find ourselves smack in the middle of interesting times, and with even more interesting times in the forecast. I and my partner John Wagner come from a company called Virtual E-Team, really a little startup based on our 40-odd years of experience in industry, where we've been transforming businesses, we've been helping with change management, which is all about changing people's systems, bringing people to higher levels of performance. We brought that all together, and I'd like to share some of our insights into the world of work with you based on our experiences. First, I wanted to go back in time. Actually, first to the early 1990s, when I was fortunate to attend a week-long conference, the very first academic conference on the internet. And a wise old Japanese professor said, "Look to the past." He says the major revolutions, the tsunamis, the perfect storms of revolution followed an S-curve like you see here. The industrial revolution, he suggested, was one of those where we went from an agricultural economy to an industrial economy. And he didn't tell us, but I found out doing research, it took only 70 years for that to happen. If you go back further in time, you look at Gutenberg. Gutenberg in the 1400s invented the printing press. So instead of monks hand creating books, it went into mass production. Within only 50 years, there were 20 million printed volumes in Europe. 20 years for a massive revolution. In the Industrial Revolution, we even had a connectivity revolution, or the start of it happening, where with the invention of the telegraph, some people call it the Victorian era internet, which is the name of a book, which is very interesting. The telegraph was revolutionizing connectivity, because all of a sudden information could move around the world, not in months and days and weeks, but in minutes. It disrupted the economy, and there was lots of disruption from this as well as the Industrial Revolution. When you're climbing that curve, the professor suggested, you cannot really prophesy what it's going to be like when you get to the top. You have to live with it, adapt, learn from it, play with it, experiment. Between 1830 and 1970, there were revolutions. There were the Bolshevik Revolution, there was the automobile revolution, there was an airplane revolution. There's all sorts of revolutions, but nothing that was really a perfect storm until we suggest we get to about 1970. In 1970, the PCs suddenly became available. I was there. I built my own PC at that time. What did we do with our PCs? We called up other PCs that had bulletin board software in there, and we madly uploaded messages and downloaded files as fast as we could, because long distance charges were really, really expensive. And we were trying to make sure we didn't pay a lot of telephone charges. And we did that for 10, 20 years until the World Wide Web got invented. Why do I say World Wide Web? Because that's the proper name for the invention that we now call the internet. But the World Wide Web was invented by Tim Berners-Lee, a scientist in Switzerland at the super labs there, as a way of instantaneously sharing information between research scientists. And it was so profound in terms of being usable, despite how simple it was, that usage exploded in the 1990s. So that by the time we got to around the year 2000, we saw something really interesting happening. First, I just want to dwell briefly, because virtual work is a key theme of my speech. Back in 1994, my partner John Wagner had this little thing said about him in the Hewlett-Packard's Measure magazine. John Wagner's office is whatever hotel room he's in, whatever empty cubicle he can borrow, or whatever airplane he happens to be on. John was forced into becoming a virtual warrior at that time, one of the pioneers, because his son had asthma and he couldn't accept a job in California to help transform HP. His two bosses, they were job sharing, were very enlightened. So they said, why don't you work virtually and let's see if we can make it work. And he did. And in the end, he actually virtualized Hewlett-Packard. What is happening now, and what's actually been happening for a few years, is what I call, I didn't want to put the word up on the screen, but an orgasm of supernovas, of explosion of services. It's unbelievable. And people are being instantaneously connected to each other at an incredible rate. The explosion of online services. Look at these numbers. They're incredible. We have a world population of 7 billion people. In that population, we have 294 billion emails, 5 billion text messages every day, 340 million tweets a day, 1.6 million visits to LinkedIn every day, the professional networking system. YouTube sees 3 billion hours of video viewed every month. And it's not all of cats doing tricks. There is powerful educational material growing almost exponentially on YouTube. Other businesses are dying. I'm not going to get into that, but one obvious one is the first-class mail, 28% decline in 10 years. Great disruptions going on because of this technology. I want to dwell briefly on the virtual collaboration environments. These are technologies and tools that have suddenly become readily available only in the last few years. I call these the Swiss Army knife of virtual collaboration. This is just an image from, it happens to be WebEx. What can we do in an environment like that? Well, everybody in the room's probably experienced webinars where somebody stands, they lecture for 45 minutes, and there's questions and answers. That is an incredibly simplistic, useful, but incredibly simplistic use of virtual collaboration environments. John and I are on the faculty of the Canadian Organizational Development Institute, who pioneered in adult education, adult experience, and they say that the true way for adults to learn and grow and accomplish things is through interaction. Remember, the internet for the first time in history has allowed us to form groups which interact instantaneously, as opposed to one-way communication mechanisms before. We had telephone and the like, but it was a fairly narrow channel. Inside these environments, you can share, everybody who's participating, here's 6 people participating in a team meeting. They can share slides, they can audio conference, they can video conference, they can message and chat each other privately or to the whole group. They can share files. All these services are collapsing into these environments, which are becoming somewhat seamless and easy to use. Truly dramatic development. How about collaborating over time? A team working together not only wants to collaborate in real time, but they want to collaborate over time. So we've seen an explosion in the growth of virtual communities. Here's one example. Lowe's, a major retailer with 270,000 employees spread across many, many locations, truly a virtual army of employees, hired 3 community managers to nurture and grow social learning communities, which 10,000 of them have now formed and are active at Lowe's. They must be getting some value out of this, I suspect. So there is a workplace revolution going on where we were formerly co-located. There's a picture of many, many years ago. And you know what happened with that? All those things came together and we had the cubicle empire. Maybe it's going to explode, the cubicle empire, and now we're going to have people working wherever they want, whenever they want. Working in a field, on a laptop. You can do that today. Are virtual workforces inevitable? If eligible workers telecommuted, about half their time, there was a brilliant pair of people in the US who built this massive workforce database, and they figured out what the savings would be. Billions and billions of dollars. Savings to the business that's doing it, to the employees, and to the community. Less roads, less services, etc. Lots of ecological savings. That's why we put this tree in the slide. It was so impressive that reeling from the 2008 economic crisis, President Obama signed a bill on December 9, 2010 that says that every federal government agency had to inventory all of their jobs, decide which ones were eligible for telecommuting, and offer it to the employee as a choice for them to telecommute or not. Desperately trying to save money and reap those benefits. What happened? 2 million workers, over 2 million workers were in that population. Almost a third of them were eligible for telework. About 8% of the 2 million accepted the opportunity to telework and are doing so. 1 out of 4 of those who are eligible took the opportunity. How did they feel about it, the workers, after they did it? They also did a survey on how engaged they were and how satisfied they were. And as you can see, the teleworkers were happier and more satisfied and more engaged than the non-teleworkers. I suggest that the new virtual organization is going to be networks of cross-disciplinary teams, because suddenly you can draw experts from anywhere. If somebody thinks I'm an expert in something and their team is in California, I can easily participate virtually. Not a problem. So you're going to have fluidly forming networks of cross-disciplinary teams. And that's what's going to happen inside organizations and across organizations. I work in a location with 100 other people. Here's a worker. This is about teams gone bad. I come in at 9, go home at 5. I never converse or associate with anybody else in that group. I'm pretty lonely. In fact, I'm not even sure my team members and my supervisor knows or cares about what I'm doing. This can happen. The issues: how do you socialize when you're a virtual worker? How do you have really good communications when your team is virtual? How do you develop trust? How do you motivate people? How do you manage behaviors? It's easier in an office to manage behaviors and control them than it is in a virtual team. And how do you deal with culture? I want to cover 11 key virtual team success factors. In over 43 years that my partner and I have been working, we've distilled out. These are the 11 things that you really have to focus on with a group that's working virtually to make them successful. You will not be shocked by what you see, because this is something, these all apply to non-virtual groups. But there's a lot of other things that apply to all groups. These are the key ones when you're operating virtually. Make sure you've defined your shared purpose, vision, and goals, and you have measurable accountabilities and deliverables. The biggest fear managers have is, I can't manage people remotely, I can't see what they're doing, which is really nonsense if you do your job right here. Build and maintain trust. Stephen Covey wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. It makes a compelling case for how critical trust is in the success of any organization. It becomes more critical when you're virtual. Our mantra is travel for trust. When you do bring your virtual team together, don't have presentations. Have arguments, debates, party, go out and visit something, or do something that's collaborative where your relationships take a big leap forward. 2 more, communicating and providing access to information. We were just working with one of our clients who just virtualized through an outsourcing initiative, and access to information was a critical issue because the systems people didn't put the systems in place, and they're struggling. Communicating access to information, providing timely feedback. If you're a boss or a supervisor, it's easy when you're in the office to forget to give feedback. It's even easier when they're remote. Orienting new team members and leaders. If you're orienting some new person to your team and they're going to be remote, it's a little tougher. You got to really work it. Making cultural diversity an advantage. As we go to virtual teams, what happens is we tend to draw in more cultures. Because, especially if you're in a large company, because the expert might be in Asia or somewhere in Europe. You can make cultural diversity an advantage. There are best practices that you can follow to bring them in. You also have to cope with them in terms of understanding other people's different behaviors. Once people understand each other's behaviors, they tend to work a lot better. That's a whole topic for another presentation. Developing team norms and operating agreements. This is really important, both for traditional teams and even more important for virtual teams, is to actually sit down as a team and say, this is the way we're going to operate. There was an interesting little piece of work done just recently in Co-working Niagara. I see Trevor here in the front, where one of our members went out and got an operating agreement from another organization that was doing it. It was very profound, and we're going to implement that in Co-working in Niagara to make that team, which is partially virtual, partially not, work better. Finally, not quite finally, but master your collaboration technologies. And the point here is, don't just grab some of the collaboration technologies I've said and use them lightly. Look at all the features. Continue to learn how to use them, because there's more and more features in there that can make you more and more productive. The last one is creating a sense of team. Celebrate. Probably the best example here is celebration. When you get people together, all in one place, celebrate. What if you can't do that? One story that my partner John tells is that at Hewlett-Packard, they held a Christmas party one year virtually. They went to everybody, they got Christmas recipes, put together a book, shipped the books all around, and then they held an online Christmas party. And one of the people who was attending the Christmas party said, let's sing the 12 Days of Christmas. So they all took turns. They assigned each other roles, and they all took turns singing it. And he tells a funny story of one person sitting in one of those vast system of cubicles, and every once in a while he'd say, the 5 golden rings. And people's heads would pop up and say, what the hell is going on there? But you can develop a sense of team, but you've got to be purposeful about it. Now, the future of virtual work. This is a picture of my partner John Wagner's computer setup, and I have one that looks very much the same. You don't need an incredible amount of technology. You don't have to spend a lot of money. That's not an expensive setup. But what we've done is we've taken the screen on the left, which is his main computer, and he spreads the screen across 2 other screens. So we can stage stuff as we're working with the teams or teaching them or leading a virtual classroom. We stage them over there. The other beauty and upside of working like this is you can maybe maneuver yourself into having a home or an office where you have a beautiful view. He lives on the end of a peninsula in the northern part of Lake Simcoe. That's his view out of his window. Mine's not quite as good, but it's nice. The trees and at the north end of StCatharines. We work constantly with each other virtually. Now, the workplace revolution. What's your challenge? Here's where I'm going to end. Take a ride in the new virtual work. If you're willing to do that, take that challenge. Experiment with new collaboration technologies. Do it first with families, friends, associates. You don't have to bet what you're doing with your customers to start with. There are technologies out there that are free or very low cost, those virtual collaboration environments. They're very easy to access. Go and experiment. Ride in the new virtual world of work. Towards the end of this morning, you're going to hear another powerful video from TED about the future of work, which very much complements this by McAfee. It's called The Future of Work. Thank you.